whoosh, whoosh. We are live. Live. With Kyle Dvorchak. Talk to me. What's happening? How
What's
are
going
you?
on? It's been I don't know if I was on this show last year, but I think it was 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago, COVID. Oh Christ, it was 3 years ago. I hosted the DFS show with Matt Kajeski, and probably that year as well. I think I was probably responsible for like ballpark, like just like maybe a third of the player write-ups in the draft guide. Like a
Oh,
bunch of
you
the
were,
team
yeah,
write.
one year you were a draft kit hero. Another year you were the co-host of The Big Tilt. You're a player profiler alum. And you're one of the people I talk about. You're like, hey, I want to come and be a contributor at Player Profiler. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Come on. We got all these things you could do. You could help us with data, right? You could help track injuries. You can help with all these things, right? You could write articles. There's so many things you can do. Help with the draft kit. And I'm like, well, Kyle Dvorchak, he's over there now at Rotoworld, and we have a whole list of people. There was Zach Kruger also. Was at Rotoworld for a while. We have people, at Fantasy Life now and Fantasy Pros and all these things that have came through the Player Profiler pipeline. And so you were one of the early ones.
Yeah, I think the first article I wrote, I know one of the first ones was like Sammy Watkins versus Keenan Allen, circa 2015.
Ooh.
And I don't know if this is the first one I wrote, but I literally just, I was wrong. Don't ooh me. I was wrong. I was 100% on Sammy Watkins.
You're Watkins. I was going to say, I bet you're on Watkins.
He was so fun. He was so fun.
He had that year with 1 year with Buffalo. He was super efficient.
Yeah, and the thing is, Keenan Allen was slow. And how could he possibly succeed if he ran that slow 40 that one time?
I know.
I think I literally just pitched this article to you like in a Word doc and like wrote a few articles for you. And then like Friedman or something reached out to me at RotoViz. But there was and there still is a very strong pipeline of like RotoViz and Player Profiler part-time writers who have like incredible opportunity and then go on to find themselves, like you said, at Fantasy Life, at Rotoworld. I think you literally, or maybe like RotoPat emailed you, like, do you have any like grinders who have way too much time on their hands that could write player news? Like
Friedman, RotoPat, these guys, they email me and they're like, do you get any guys for me?
And that's how I got in a
roster watch. Alex now, They email like, would you get any good writers? And like, yeah, I got this guy, I got this guy, I got this guy.
Real degenerates. Yeah. They've got too much time. They have too much of an obsession with this one thing. Like, we'll reward you for that obsession.
Because I'm like, listen, I'm not fucking NBC, bro. I can't, we have a very sort of lean organization here. And if I think that there's a way someone can go get paid to write about fantasy football full time, you're goddamn right I'm going to put their name in a hat.
Yeah, so get your name. If you're listening and you're interested, good job. Get your name in the hat here, because this hat has a hole in it that instead of a rabbit actually just leads to other hats. Those hats are important for this very odd metaphor I've constructed.
No, I know, it's a thing. Yeah, so yeah, very happy. I'm always happy, and it's good vibes out there in the universe. It's just good vibes in the universe. Like there's you can have a scarcity mentality or an abundance mentality, and I very much have an abundance mentality. My attitude is, well, if one person doesn't have time to contribute to us because they're now working their ass off over here, there's probably someone else who's very talented, who's looking for an opportunity that wants to, take over that spot, writing that article or contributing in this way. And it makes for a few more meetings that I have on the weekends, right? Talking to people, getting introduced, asking for resumes and reading through like the article submissions that we get. Podfather at rotounderworld.com. If you would like to contribute to playerprofiler.com, we'd love to have you. And yeah, so I take the time to read everything that people send me. I respond to I've always responded to every email. One of my points of pride is that if you send me an email, I will read it. I may not respond. I almost always respond. There are a few emails I do not respond to because I'm like, no. Especially if you're asking me for something right off the bat. No, I may ghost you. But if you're just like, hey, here's something I wanted you to read, or here's something interesting.
There's a difference between, hey, can I write for you? Or, hey, I have written this thing for you. It's a give versus a take almost. I want to take your time. Can I write for you with no pitch? Versus, hey, I literally wrote this thing. I even went into the article. I remember going into the article I wrote for Player Profiler and manually hyperlinking every single player that was in the Google Doc article. There's in the back end of the Player Profiler CMS, there's a button that just does it for you once you get access to the back end. But I obviously didn't have it at the time. So I literally just went and I was like, how does a Player Profiler article look when it's on the site? So I copy and pasted every single, probably like 15 or 20 of these at the end, just because like that little extra step, I was like, this should look like it deserves to be on the site. Did it? You said yes, so I'll take your word for it. But like, I was offering as much as I possibly could. The article, other than, needing some editing, needing some love, was a gift to you in that it was like, hey, I just want this to be published. It's it needed editing, but the point being is mostly done, right? Whereas, hey, can I write for you? Can I host a podcast for you? Without any sort of offer is very different. And that's why, for the most part, people are good and they give you these offers and you respond to every single one. Guessing the ones you don't respond to are kind of the ones like, hey, man, can I host a podcast?
Yeah, or I get a lot of can I guest post an article and I'm going to put a bunch of links back to my website that I'm trying to improve the SEO for. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. Like, so I get about three of these, super obvious sort of SEO tactic emails for every genuine writer who just is looking like, hey, I have an idea or I want to, get my take out there in the world. And so I've my radar for that is very, very well tuned now. I feel good about that. I'm just like, yep, nope. So yeah, I read those and I'm just like, no, off to the side. But it's very clear when someone is just hungry and they want to get their voice out there like you, and then you come in, you start writing, and then I'm like, hey, you were on the podcast and you sounded good, and I know you're really into DFS. Do you want to host the DFS show? And you're like, sure. That's how it works. That it's really that simple. If you show some passion in an area, then you'll be thought of, right? People love energy and passion. There are some shows that I do where I'm like, hey, that was okay. But I just wasn't feeling it, right? And people can tell, right? And there are other shows where I'm like, I didn't have anything. I did no research, right? But I was energized. And those shows come off better. So
those shows are the best. Those shows where you don't do research and you just vibe with the person are so much more. Obviously, not doing a lot of work is kind of fun, but really, I think what people care about most is like, I can honestly just like spout off roundabout almost every player in the NFL's like target share, right? Like, I don't need to actually research that. It's like, oh, Jamar Chase sees like a lot of targets. He's probably like top 8 in target share. I don't need the exact number, but what I need to be is like exactly vibing with my co-host or exactly vibing with my other people, because that's what people care about. Like, they want good information that's extremely entertaining. I honestly think people would take just borderline like usable information that's really fun over the best information, like purely just the best projections, like for season long DFS, whatever, if it's boring as all hell. So like, that is, something you kind of learn on that DFS show. You paired me with Matt Gajeski, who works at Stochastic DFS company. And we both worked at Stochastic at the exact same time. The music. We both worked at Stochastic at the same time too. You hired us. We got hired at Stochastic at the same time. So our vibes were matching because we did shows there together. We did shows here together. And I've met him in person a bunch of times. We're good friends now.
It's time. It's time, Kyle. Oh, yes. It's time. Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program. A senior NFL analyst from NBC Sports and Roto Underworld and Rotoworld. It's a Roto Underworld alum. That's right. Here with me today, it is Kyle Dvorchak. Talk to me.
Hey man, how's it going? That's by far the best intro I've ever gotten. I don't think I've ever gotten such a hype intro. Truly, when you're out here grinding like I am, you're like, oh, this guy's target share actually went up 5%. No one's like giving you the hype intro. They're like, and welcome to our resident spreadsheet analyst, Kyle Dvorchak. So getting such a incredible intro is pretty fun.
It's fun. I was wrong about a bunch of things, and I was right about a bunch of things, and so were you.
Happens.
I was wrong about the Chargers. You were too, right? Didn't you think the Chargers would be okay? Didn't you think at this point in the season the Chargers would have a winning record?
I mean, aren't they like top 5 in scoring, top 5 in yards? I mean, they're doing for me. I don't care if they win or lose. Like, I didn't place any bets on their like season-long win total. How could you possibly, given this team's resume, purely vibes based, given this team's resume of Chargers, it's inside the 2-minute warning, Chargers with the ball down 3, and all of the incredible L's they've taken, purely based on vibes, no pure analysis in the slightest. How could you possibly bet on this team's season-long win total? But right now, they're 7th in points, 8th in yards. They've got like a top 5 fantasy receiver, top 6 or so fantasy quarterback. Also, that coach's been hurt. So I don't know. I feel right about those aspects. What else is there to be right about? Who cares if they win or lose?
It's weird. I can't believe it. It's hard. This was supposed to be the year they were healthy in the offseason. So usually it's the preseason injuries and they're doomed. This year they avoided the preseason injuries. I thought this is it. And now they have the in-season injuries with Mike Williams and others. This was the best though. The Monday night line, Josh Palmer. Okay. This was, you can't make this up. Josh Palmer on playerprofiler.com is the most average receiver in the history of the database.
I believe that. That actually is like so believable. The most believable thing you've ever said. When you look at him play, you're like, that guy is one of the 98 best receivers in the world. He's probably 97, in fact.
Yeah, he was like pick 100. He was had average athleticism, exactly. Average college dominator, average breakout, everything exactly average. And he's been exactly average in the NFL. And then last night I looked up and I was like, that is the most Josh Palmer. You're not going to get more Josh Palmer. 4 for 7. So not a great catch rate. 60 yards, not a great yards per target, 10 fantasy points, which is what you would expect from an average pseudo starter wide receiver. It was just the most Josh Palmer. You're like, what was the coolest stat of the weekend? I'm like, oh, Josh Palmer, 4 for 7, 60 yards, 10 fantasy points. That was the center of the bullseye for a guy like a Josh Palmer. Dallas Cowboys, they won the game, okay? But when I talked to Anand and Dury on the Decision Point show, and we talked about, hey, who could come out of the NFC, right? 49ers, Eagles, and that's about it. And then he brought up a couple sleeper teams. He didn't mention the Cowboys. No one believes in this team. No, they can go and they can beat the Chargers in LA, and it doesn't matter. It's the weirdest thing. There's nothing they can do. No one believes that they're any good.
They're solid. They should come up in the conversation. It's tough for them because you think if they're in the NFC South, they're winning that division so instantly. But the fact they're in the NFC East, Eagles look much more fallible than they did last year, but my bet is still on them to win. So they're going to ultimately enter the playoffs as no higher than like the 3 seed. So that's difficult for them. But the NFL plays a bunch of best of 1 games into the Super Bowl, which is a best of 1 game in a sport that is already extremely random. Yeah, they can do it. But do I think they have a good shot at being like if you strip away all randomness and try to evaluate teams, one of the best 2 teams in the NFC alone, let alone the AFC, no, a lot has to continue to turn sideways for them to fall behind the 49ers and Eagles, who both lost last week, but I don't really care. I still think the Cowboys are a second-tier team. I think maybe the best part of being in the NFC is the second tier is like Cowboys, Lions. That's it. I don't like Seahawks. I mean, Seahawks are okay, sure.
No, but Anand mentioned the Seahawks before he mentioned the Cowboys. I think it's partly because, the Diggs injury really was devastating. I mean, when they lost Diggs, that was it. I mean, that was their season. To lose a Trayvon Diggs early in the season, who is the linchpin of your secondary, that's it. It's that if the Chargers lose a Bosa for the season, then it's like, okay, it's a wrap, right? It's just that guy is so critical, right? The Jair Alexander, Sauce Gardner, Jets lose a Sauce Gardner. Okay, the defense is the reason why they're competitive, right? So that it is unfortunate. The thing with the Eagles is they've built a team that doesn't have that level of fragility. They can lose any player at any position, and they have a bunch of Pro Bowl caliber players behind them. That's the beauty of the depth that the Eagles have built, and so they can sustain an injury in a way that the Cowboys can't. The Chargers, like they I guess couldn't sustain an injury to Mike Williams. Maybe if they had drafted Jordan Addison, right? Jordan Addison played football in Los Angeles. Jordan Addison was the clear pick. He was the mock draft choice. He was the scouts' choice with the voting. It was so clear. It was supposed to be Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison, and then a conversation. And then remember, the Chargers, they went off the board and they said, well, actually, Quentin Johnston over Jordan Addison. That was a big surprise on draft day. Just want to remind everybody. And also, it was even more shocking because Jordan Addison would be a 1-for-1 replacement for the 31-year-old Keenan Allen. It just made so much sense. And so whenever teams go off the board and they surprise you in the first round, especially when the guy, that's why, remember when the Lions drafted Hutchinson? Right? It's like, yeah, did I think that Kayvon Thibodeau was maybe a more impressive prospect? Yeah, right? But it just made too much sense. The guy went to Michigan, right? They've been scouting him and talking to his family for 5 years. Just draft the guy and move on. And it turns out that was the right choice. Just draft Jordan Addison and move on. Now they have Quentin Johnston. What level of bust do you think Quentin Johnston is going to be? We know he's a catastrophic bust at this point, but are we talking Kadarius Toney? Are we talking Josh Dotson? What level of bust do you foresee a year from now with Quentin Johnston?
I'm going to say Kadarius Toney, which is bust. Like Kadarius Toney's first team, he actually looked good. The thing is, he looked good, and his team
Kadarius Toney had one good game. Remember the one good game?
Oh, such a good game.
And his team still gave up yards.
On him. And his team still gave up on him. And then the next team he went to was like, you're a gadget player. You're not going to run more than 20 routes in a game. And I only say that because I'm trying to regress my answer to like most first round picks hang around, whereas like Josh Dotson could hardly even hang around. But like in my gut, I'm like, this dude is very Josh Dotson, like Laquan Treadwell-esque. And honestly, Laquan Treadwell kind of made something of himself is that he became a journeyman, like 53-man roster adjacent level player. Actually, you know, that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say Johnston because the NFL clearly valued him as a first round pick. I think most teams almost certainly had him as the fourth. Some probably had him as the third best receiver in the draft, but I think he was a consensus first round pick. 32 teams roundabout said this guy is one of the best 32 players in the upcoming draft. I'm going to say that counts for something. They probably were onto something. They were off the mark, but I'm going to say Johnston hangs around as like a wide receiver 4-5. He in 2026, he pops up for a 4 for 85 and a touchdown game for the Bears. And you're like, who drafted him? Was it the Rams? It was the Rams. And no, you're wrong. It was the Chargers. But like, this looks bad. The fact that he can't play over perfectly average, you know, balanced as all things should be, Josh Palmer, is a very frustrating sign. And not only that, but they're actually running like more 21 or more 12 personnel. I mean, look, again, I actually love Donald Parham, but if
it's an
the
indictment.
team is if the team is deciding, let's send Donald Parham out there, Johnston isn't ready, and like that's what they think is the best decision for them on like 30% of their plays, that is very bad. He has time to turn things around, but this is as rough of it is literally as rough of a start as you can kind of find.
When targets are sent Quentin Johnston's way, bad things happen.
Very.
That's the problem, right? That is the problem. And yeah, we're going to look up, and he's going to be on a different team, and we're like, who drafted him again? More total fantasy points in their career, Jahan Dotson or Quentin Johnston?
That's a good one. You'll ask me a question later whether the answer will be Jahan Dotson. Jahan. I mean, Jahan's rookie season was good. It wasn't great. Like, he wasn't great on a bunch of like per route numbers, but he scored touchdowns. He made plays. Like, he's going to have more fantasy points as a rookie by a wide margin. And he missed games as a rookie by a wide margin than Quentin Johnston. And that's a good predictor of future success. It's not perfect, as we can tell by his second year, but some points in his first year and still being on the field. Johnston is barely on the field, whereas at least Jahan Dotson is like out there all the time. He's not doing anything right now, but getting out there, both as a rookie and in a second season, that is good for something. As a rookie, it was good for like 6 or 7 touchdowns. Johnston can't even get out there right now. So Jahan.
Yeah, Jahan Dawson's a functional receiver. Like, he's doing absolutely nothing. Nothing. It's very disappointing. He's being dropped across fantasy football, but he's a functional receiver. Quentin Johnston cannot say that.
Yeah.
So who do you think is going to score more fantasy points the rest of the way? Zach Moss or Jonathan Taylor?
Come on. It's Jonathan Taylor. It's so obviously Jonathan Taylor.
Is it?
I get it. Like, come on. I mean, literally last week, it took them 1 week of watching, and Zach Moss is good. Fine. I don't care. Whatever. Think whatever.
Zach Moss has been awesome.
He's been awesome. And
one of the most efficient running backs in the league.
After 1 week, the very next week, they're like, all right, more Jonathan Taylor carries. It took them like 10 days. And in the first game back for Jonathan Taylor, they held 3 straight walkthroughs. They didn't actually hold like real practices. And the coach cited this as a thing like, oh, he literally didn't get to practice. You think he got a week of practice and went to play? No, he didn't. He got a week of walkthroughs. And then he said very much, we're going to keep ramping up his workload. And then what happens next week? He sees more snaps, he sees more carries, and he sees a much higher percentage of the team's carries because they got blown out and couldn't run the ball at all. But immediately, they're like, all right, more carries for Jonathan Taylor. It took them 10 days to make that decision. I'm going to roll with that.
Okay, that was a setup question. It's obviously Jonathan Taylor. It's a setup question for a much more pressing question for those making their waiver wire claims of Elijah Mitchell or Jordan Mason.
I'm so torn on this one. I think
one guy needs to get ramped up. One guy's just coming back from injury.
I know
one guy's a proven starter in the league. The other guy was an undrafted journeyman type player with Zach Moss level athleticism.
I'm going to say Eli Mitchell, but I do think if you're looking for like week 7 ceiling, if one of these guys is going to go out and get 20 carries, it's probably not Eli Mitchell, because they told us very clearly with their usage last week that this guy who has never stayed healthy in his career is not ready to get a full amount of carries, but who is more likely to get 10 carries next week, maybe even 15 carries. It's probably Eli Mitchell. So early in the week, based on the usage last week, I was pretty convinced it was Jordan Mason. I'm going to say I'm like 55-45 Eli Mitchell now. It's slight, and it's only because Eli Mitchell is like really good. Actually, every time he gets on the field and gets a starting role and stays healthy through that game, he looks really good with the football in his hands. Poor dude just can't stay healthy. And I think that's like reasonable to say. That is a lot of variance. We just will never get, for most players, a reasonable sample size, say, oh, this guy's injury prone, this guy's not. But I think even if we do or don't know, whether you believe guys can be injury prone and we can tell that within a few seasons of them playing or not, coaches 100% believe that. They believe that Eli Mitchell shouldn't be going out and getting 20 carries. They might be right. So I'm not sure we get the workhorse Eli Mitchell we've seen in previous games. But I think you should probably project him for straight up more carries than Jordan Mason. I think it's committee, but you should project him for more carries.
I agree. Great answer.
Thank you.
Is Trevor Lawrence elite?
No, but I mean, I think it's all what you're measuring it against. And I think the elite quarterbacks are like Mahomes, Hurts, Burrow, missing Allen.
How about Herbert?
I also don't think so.
If you're starting a franchise today, who do you got? You got Herbert or Lawrence?
I'm taking Herbert because I think he has pushed up close to that elite tier more often. Last year, Trevor Lawrence was really good. He was like 10th in EPA per play, 13th in CPOE, like very strong numbers. And I'm totally fine. In my mind, I throw out his rookie season. To my money, Urban Meyer was the worst NFL head coach of the 26 or so years I've been alive. I'm going to say that rookie season means nothing. It should not affect how we view him. And what I'm going to say is functionally his rookie season, he was really good. But this year he hasn't been as good, whereas Herbert, we have seen him push for that top 5, top 6 status. He's doing it maybe this year in terms of the efficiency metrics. His team still isn't great. Well, that sucks, but at least his numbers are still pretty good. And a few years ago, last year also wasn't great, but the year before that and his rookie year were really high highs. I think they're very close to each other, but I've seen one really start to push towards that top 5 status, and Lawrence has been more in that top 10 status. And Herbert's done it for longer. He's been better for a longer period of time. So it's Herbert just because I'm more confident that he's closer to 5 or 6. Could Lawrence jump him next year? Sure. I don't think either of them are elite. I don't think either of them are on the Allen, Hurts, etc. tier. But if one guy is closer, to me, it's Herbert.
Trevor Lawrence's EPA has collapsed this year.
This year's bad. He's had a lot of drops, and he's lost a lot of drops on EPA, but that doesn't make up for it. That wouldn't bring him to where he was last year. He's been worse this year.
He's been top 5 in drops, over 10 drops already. It's crazy. It is crazy. The air yards per attempt, low. He's keeping the ball close to the line of scrimmage. He doesn't have receivers that are really going to push the ball down the field other than Christian Kirk. And Christian Kirk is more of a tweener. He's best deployed in the slot. So he's got a bunch of slot plus receivers. Zay Jones, slot plus. Calvin Ridley, slot plus. Christian Kirk is slot plus. So it's just he doesn't have a true alpha. He's got 3 betas, right? They're trying to do an amalgam of 3 betas to make an alpha. And I think that's one of the things that's holding him back. The deep ball completion percentage is good. The money throws are there down the field. But when he's pressured, he collapses. So that's what's happening with Trevor Lawrence. And at this point in his career, this was supposed to be the MVP caliber season. And so in Dynasty in particular, he's not making that leap. And he actually, on the Dynasty rankings on Player Profiler, you've seen that he's lost some lifetime value points. It's just it's what's happening. Right? It's the matchups haven't even been that difficult. It's not like they've been facing these super stout front sevens. They haven't been facing the Jets every week. It's not. It's a concern, but it's not something where it's like, oh, we're terrified this guy's going to be a bust. No, it's just like, hey, if you have this guy in Dynasty and you were hoping he was going to be
he had the next Joe Burrow sort of vibes.
Next Joe Burrow level asset. It's trending toward not being the case. It's
trending towards the next Dak Prescott, the next Kirk Cousins, which is like good. That's a good guy to have in Superflex, but we may be taking the home run off the table. We're like, oh, he's not hitting a 400-foot home run. I still think he's good. You still think he's good, but is he great? Is he going to be great? That I thought, like we talked about, I thought this could be the leap. This could be the leap year where he pushes into the Joe Burrow territory. Maybe he's more Kirk Cousins. And that's still like a win from the number 1 overall pick, given how many of them completely flame out.
Good point. That is a win. But it would be nice though. It would be nice to see him with a true alpha. I know that so many convinced themselves that it was going to be Calvin Ridley who was going to give him that. No, that's not. It would be nice if he could have a Michael Wilson level wide receiver, a guy that's 6'2" with athleticism. That would be cool to see him paired with that guy because he is very willing to push the ball down the field, and that creates danger plays, but that also creates money throws. And so he does have more of a gunslinger sort of approach to the game than, say, Justin Herbert does, but still predominantly because of the routes that are being run and but the speed of his receivers, he's not able to push the ball down the field as much as he'd want. It's not over. Like, he still could, he still has a year and a half, I would say, to prove that he can join that Joe Burrow tier, but he's teetering and is trending towards not happening. He does have the most underrated tight end in the league, though, doesn't he?
Why do you like Evan Engram? He's just fine. This is the most... He's probably better than Josh Palmer, but from fantasy purposes, he very much reminds me of like, he's the tight end 10. He's the way we say, Brandon Cooks has never finished lower than his ADP, and he beats it by like 6 spots every year. I do think
Brandon Cooks is underrated every year too.
Sure.
Yes, this is a great. Yes, he's the Evan Brandon Engram, Cooks of tight ends. That's terrific.
Yeah. And Evan Engram is also on that Trevor Lawrence sort of range where, like, we're past the point of him being great, but we're at the point of him being good. I just don't know, like, underrated. I don't know. I think if you polled the average fan, they'd say he's somewhere in the top 15, but not somewhere in the top 7. And sure, if you think he's 8 or if you think he's 15, I couldn't care less.
He is the quintessential firewall tight end. And if you took Freiermuth over him, well, you're disappointed. See, he's not disappointed. He's giving you those 12 fantasy points. So many tight ends can't even give you that, and that's why I believe he's underrated. Michael Pittman, underrated?
I like this one, yeah. I mean, it seems like there are a few guys in the league that sort of profiles this where I like, given his like fantasy production and his overall like raw stats output, I'm not sure we'll ever get like the Michael Pittman 1,400-yard season, but it seems like every quarterback who's ever laid eyes upon Michael Pittman says like, I'm going to target that guy a lot. And I think that's one thing that like people don't, that I have a different view than people on, is guys who earn targets are really good. I don't want to say I don't care what they do with the targets. I'd like them to do something with the targets, but earning a target is a really difficult skill in the NFL. Like, you are going out there, you have to beat out players in practice, you have to beat the cornerback, you have to get open before other players on your team get open. There are so many things that go into earning a target, and every quarterback that sees Michael Pittman says, that target, that guy, give him a target. It's the like Deontay Johnson thing, except he probably does more with his targets than Deontay Johnson. But I do think like the fact that a whole bunch of different quarterbacks have played with Deontay Johnson, and every one of them says, I'm going to throw this guy the ball a lot, it says a lot about him. Now, do I wish Deontay Johnson didn't drop every pass he saw, and do I wish he produced yards after the catch? Oh, those would be great. We'd love to see those things. But earning a target is like maybe the most difficult thing a receiver has to do. Michael Pittman does that a ton, and Deontay Johnson's kind of my analogy for that.
And Pittman's securing a lot of passes. It was the most obvious thing ever would be to trade for Michael Pittman when you knew Anthony Richardson going to miss about a month. You're going to have Gardner Minshew. I didn't know he was going to throw for 55 passes. All right, 55 pass attempts is incredible. And then, shockingly, 55 pass attempts from Gardner Minshew, 15 targets for Michael Pittman. Ring it up, baby. What about the most disappointing receivers? Give me 2 or 3 receivers that have most disappointed you this year.
Mentioned Jahan Dotson. He has fewer targets than Curtis Samuel. That is disappointing.
Isn't Curtis Samuel one of the most underrated receivers too?
Maybe. Sure. Yeah. I think disappointing is expectations versus what happened. My expectation was that he would see a lot more targets than Curtis Samuel. Maybe other people had a different expectation.
There are a lot of people that had that expectation.
They weren't drafting like it. They were not drafting, or at least they were drafting like Jahan Dotson was going to see a lot more targets than it was drafted as if he could push Terry McLaurin for targets. And now he can't even beat out Curtis Samuel for targets. Curtis Samuel was probably good. To your point, like Curtis Samuel is good. I thought Jahan Dotson was a lot better than him. And that just seems to be wrong. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans is just dusting him. Maybe it's just a stylistic fit, but it turns out the guy who just turns out like 1,000-yard seasons like it's nothing is seeing more targets, more air yards, more end zone targets, despite missing like half a game, being more banged up. I thought Chris Godwin I think has a chance to out-target, out-produce Mike Evans. Not happening this year, and it doesn't look like it's ever going to be particularly close. My last one, Jerry Jeudy. Steve Smith roasted him.
I knew you were going to say Jerry Jeudy. I knew it. I freaking knew it.
Steve Smith roasted him, and then he proceeded to put up what was like a 3 for like 12 game. Oh, man. That is, honestly, the levels of disappointment based on like equals numbers expectation minus reality output is not nearly as bad as the physical pain of Steve Smith annihilating him on like national television and then him going out and proving Steve Smith very right. Admittedly, Russell Wilson was terrible in that game, but it doesn't matter. Like that was a brutal, horribly timed performance from Jerry Jeudy.
As someone who's also been roasted by Steve Smith, I was hoping that Jerry Jeudy, even though I've been fading Jerry Jeudy into oblivion, I've never drafted him in my life, and I've always thought he was one of the most overrated receivers in the league. Once Steve Smith roasts you, now I'm a fan, right? And
he's the underdog now. He is a massive underdog.
Now I'm in. Now you're the underdog, and nothing, and nothing. Right? Nothing. All right, now, Derek Carr, 19 of 22 to running backs and tight ends, below 50% completion percentage since he's returned throwing to wide receivers. So he's not 100%, right?
He seems fine. He's got like one of the best completion percent over expecteds over the past 2 weeks. He's got an ADOT over 10 over the past 2 weeks. And although low completion percentage to his receivers last week he averaged 9.6 yards per attempt when throwing to Olave, Shaheed, Thomas. I think the nature of Carr's game on this team is that he's just heaving the ball deep or checking it down to some like nobody tight end or the corpse of Alvin Kamara. And that's like the ultimate variance play style.
Kamara's a corpse now?
Maybe it's the way they're using him, right? But they're like, oh, Alvin Kamara, the guy we give 20 carries to between the tackles. I can't imagine that that's good for him at this point in his career, and it's never been good at this point. So to me, Carr looks fine over the past 2 weeks. 3 weeks ago, he had like a check down champion ADOT of like sub 4 or something that was horrible. And not only did he check down a ton, he was inaccurate even as he was checking down. These past 2 weeks, he's playing as he did in the first 2 or 3 games of the season, extremely high variance. He's chucking 40-yard balls to Rashid Shaheed. So, of course, like some of the time, that's going to look bad. And even the advanced metrics, he has like one of the highest completion percents over expected over the past 2 weeks. So, and he threw 50, I think he threw 50 passes last week at a 10 ADOT. If his shoulder was banged up, it would have like literally fallen off on the field. They would have carried it off if like, I don't think he could actually physically go out and make those throws. So I'm going to say he's fine and high variance. He's fine in that, like, health-wise, he's fine. He's not that great of a quarterback. He's a meh guy.
Thank you for debunking this. I appreciate that. Wheels up for Olave. What about Shaheed, though? Like, at this point, isn't it just better to target Shaheed than Michael Thomas? At what point does Shaheed displace Thomas in this offense?
And the problem is Shaheed, like, he does one thing very well. He burns people deep, but you can only do that so many times in a game. Like, of course, if you just multiply like equals yards per target by every single target you could possibly give Shaheed, he's going to look great. But he's a guy that it's not that hard to take him out of a game. It's also a valuable asset to have where a player on a team is someone you have to say, we cannot let him beat us. You can almost let Michael Thomas beat you. You're like, oh,
of course you can.
Michael Thomas beat us. He beat us for 4 yards. No, like teams that invite the run on them. Michael Thomas is the extension of that. You'd still probably rather let a run succeed than a pass. But in the pecking order of efficiency, yeah, he's the third. I just think we don't have this expanded role available for Shaheed because he's not that dynamic. He's not that versatile of a player.
He isn't that versatile, you're right. But Michael Thomas is useless.
Yeah.
I mean, we have rankings on Player Profiler for all these advanced metrics, and what we have for the yards per target for Michael Thomas is just, it says hilarious. That's what it is. It's not a number. So yeah, 328 yards and loses. This is why, like, the football analysts are coming down on Derek Carr. He can't be healthy. He's not good enough. And actually, the advanced metrics say otherwise. You're absolutely right. Though he was beaten, it is worth remembering, by a rookie quarterback who threw for only 199 yards and has looked amazing. When there was this lockstep consensus that it had to be Bryce Young at the 101 in the NFL draft, what were you thinking when you heard? Because we knew the ceiling outcome for Anthony Richardson was, Super Bowl winning or at least Cam Newton getting you to the Super Bowl with Superman mode, right? That was in Anthony Richardson's range of outcomes. And C.J. Stroud looked the part of an Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow level quarterback in the NFL, and it would have taken quite the outlier for Bryce Young, right? How long has it been since Drew Brees came into the league? Year 2000, 2001? So more than 20 years goes by before like a 5'8" quarterback, right? Comes in. Like we've done this with Baker Mayfield. The hope has been there. There's been, hey, the height doesn't matter for quarterbacks, and then everyone gets reminded, yes, it does matter. And then oh no, we have a new intelligence test to measure mental acuity and information processing, and this guy aced it with the help of his father. And he went to Alabama, so he's the clear 101, and there's no debate. There's no conversation. There was no conversation. There was no conversation. There was no debate this offseason. It was clearly going to be Bryce Young. No one was doubting it. And I just thought that was very weird. And I'm just very happy that now C.J. Stroud looks like worlds better.
Yeah, I didn't mind Bryce Young as the first overall pick. I think maybe to your point is that the consensus of him being so very obviously number one was very interesting because CJ Stroud had him beat. Bryce Young was very good against the best competition we have to offer below the NFL level in the SEC, was very good in all the advanced metrics, but CJ Stroud was better. And if you want to say his competition wasn't as good, I think that's really splitting hairs. I think, it's hard actually to discern if the Big Ten or the SEC are better, but CJ Stroud's numbers were better. He was efficient in nearly every metric, like yards per attempt, EPA per play, EPA per pass attempt, EPA per dropback. He was beating Bryce Young, who was still really good. But the fact that we can't discern through our numbers which one of these guys is better makes me think that, go ahead, go with what you find are some intangibles, except if it's a grifty intelligence test. Maybe don't go with that intangible. Don't go with the clear scam as the intangible you're going to run with. But, if you think, the size is what's important, sure, go CJ Stroud. If you think CJ Stroud struggles under pressure, which were real, that was the one area of his game you kind of poke a hole in, is he struggled under pressure in college? Sure, for that reason, go with Bryce Young. But the fact that the consensus settled so easily on Bryce Young, that to me is what was fascinating. Because I had in my pre-draft rankings, I had CJ Stroud ahead of Bryce Young. It was narrow. I didn't really care too much either way. I will say, though, I capitulated. When the NFL made the firm decision that Bryce Young was better, I said, okay, I'll take your word for it. There's a lot of scouts, a lot of data that goes into that. I flipped them in my post-draft rankings, but without knowing where they were going to land, CJ Stroud to me was a marginally better prospect. And it was very strange. There was a moment. It wasn't true that there was never a moment where we thought CJ Stroud would go one. There was a very brief moment where I think he flipped in the betting markets to be the favorite. We had Josh McCown said, we'll have to play basketball when you get to Charlotte or something like that. And McCown did a really glowing, I think on Underdog, he did a glowing video sort of essay, whatever you want to call it, film breakdown. And he was the team's quarterback coach or something. I don't remember. So for a brief moment, the Panthers seemingly had fallen into the right choice. And I'm very curious if this was something that came down from ownership that, no, we're going with Bryce Young, or if this was something that was a complete fabrication, we just read too much into this Josh McCown stuff. But there was a moment where they almost walked into saving their franchise. And instead of having either, let's say they don't trade up and they get Jalen Carter, they keep DJ Moore, next year they get Caleb Williams, etc. Instead, they're stuck with Bryce Young. This is, as much as Bryce Young's a fine pick, it turned out to be wrong, but I don't think the process was horrific. This will set the franchise back for 5+ years.
The draft capital mob is in flames. They're absolutely in flames right now. There's Bryce Young, Quentin Johnston, and we'll talk about him later, Dalton Kincaid, draft capital mob, absolutely in flames. I have 10 burning questions with Kyle Dvorchak after this. This episode is brought to you by Rival Fantasy. Rival Fantasy, the coolest fantasy platform not enough people know about, but they will once I'm done, baby, because they're always innovating. They just rolled out seasonal leagues. We set them up for patrons, for our listeners, and they funded over $1,000 in payouts. That's what Rival's all about. They're always innovating. They already had the fantasy book where you can take overs and unders, stack them up, multiply your payout, but then they added challenges so you can set your own lines and put them out there for the community. And then you can browse the community's lines and say, hey, this guy's crazy. I'm going to take the other side. It's cool. And they have fantasy bingo. Rival Fantasy is reminding me how much fun I can have with fantasy football, and use that promo code PLAYER. The promo code is PLAYER. They give you a $100 instant deposit match plus $25 plus a free play. That promo code is PLAYER for up to $125 in deposit bonus and a free play. You can't beat it. And we're back with Kyle Dvorchak. And I'm trying to find the overlay here. I can't. Is it up here? Bingo! There you are. Okay. 10 burning questions. Dameon Pierce. What?
Well, I mean, this is like...
What?
Yeah.
What? He's on a winning team. Like, it was one thing when he was supposed to be on the Texans that we were sold the Texans as a bad team.
Yep.
And the Texans aren't going to score any touchdowns. The Texans can't matriculate the ball down the field. They can't sustain drives. But now that he's on the Texans that are good, you would think that that guy on a good team would be super productive. What?
Yeah, imagine time traveling back to like August 28th. I think like the one or two games that Dameon Pierce played in the preseason, and he played every single snap of the starters. He ran the routes. He got the carries. Maybe he got the goal line work. They probably didn't make it to the goal line. Whatever. Got all the snaps and all the reports. Dameon Pierce, 3 down back. Dameon Pierce gonna blow up this year. And you're thinking, okay, the last needle we need to thread is this offense can't be terrible. Time travel to that person and tell them, oh, CJ Stroud just isn't good. He's one of the better rookies we've seen to start his career. It's, I'm time traveling from week 6, but I'm going to tell you he's hot, he's fire. You'd be taking him in like the second round. You'd be taking Dameon Pierce in the third round. And instead he played fewer snaps than Devin Singletary last week. Like
the week before he got all the snaps and all the carries and still didn't do anything. It doesn't matter. If he gets displaced by Singletary, he doesn't produce. When he gets all the carries, he doesn't produce. It's truly maddening. It's truly maddening because I thought I was going to be right two ways. I wasn't drafting him at all. He was one of those dead zone running backs that I wanted no part of. Dead zone running back on a bad team who's not a target commander out of the backfield. I'm like, that's an easy fade. There's a lot of other guys I'd rather have. Like, give me a guy with breakaway speed like Kenneth Walker. There's so many other backs I'd rather. DeAndre Swift is in that range of draft picks. David Montgomery. You could get running backs that are actually on good teams. But that was the thing. Like, why would you draft Dameon Pierce on a bad team, or supposedly a bad team, when you could get basically Dameon Pierce but a better receiver on a better team in David Montgomery? It didn't make any sense, right? But then it turns out, oh wait, Texans are good, and Pierce is underperforming. I might trade for him. I could be right two ways on Dameon Pierce. I could fade him in the draft, and I could trade for him. Bada bing, bada boom. And now it's just bada bing, bada oops.
Yeah. You canceled all those trades. You saw one more week, and they were like, "Let me think about
it."
No more thinking about it. No more thinking about
it. But this week. Also, another running back I was drafting more than Dameon Pierce in those middle rounds, Rachaad White. What do we do about Rachaad White? That's another burning question.
I just don't think he's very good. The one thing he has going for him is every backup on his team is like not really an NFL caliber player, and he's probably an NFL caliber player. And maybe all of the running backs on this team, as they did last year, look very bad because it's a poor offensive line, a poorly schemed team, and especially this year, the quarterback play has gotten worse. Not actually as bad as I thought it'd be, but it's not great. Like, you don't have to respect Baker Mayfield when he's throwing. But that's not going to change. At what point, do we say, oh, well, I don't know if he's good or bad, but he keeps producing like he's terrible. Does his talent matter in the equation? To some degree, yes. To some degree, I don't know. That's not changing. His offensive line isn't changing. His team's very bland scheme isn't changing. The best he's going to do is be what we thought Dameon Pierce was, which is a fine, okay running back on a bad team. The team is a little better. The talent is a little bit worse than I think we thought we were getting into with White.
My problem with Rachaad White is he looks good to me. He looks exciting. He looks fast. like he looks like a sexy back out there, right? I always think that he's gonna take a pass and make a guy miss, and then he doesn't. Right? He feels better, looks better than he actually is, and so you have a guy projected to have an 80% opportunity share, sharing the backfield with absolutely nobody that's any good, and he has an all-purpose skill set with explosiveness, and he just has that sex factor. I'm gonna get got by that guy every time. I
got got by him too.
I'm gonna get got by that you can get me every time with that guy. You can just write it down.
We'll always have David Johnson. They can literally never take that away from us.
Yeah, we got David. It's a very David Johnson vibe player. Again,
he was that kind of prospect too.
No tight end of consequence, so he has all those like super short and dump offs to himself. He's the only check down option. I mean, how? He's going to have weeks. I still think he's going to have weeks, okay? Alexander Mattison, though, I think has a clearer path to having some big boom performances because he's on a much better offense. He outtouched Cam Akers 25-2, but he didn't produce. At some point, you can't feed a guy like that level of that number of touches and that opportunity share. He eventually is going to produce, especially when he's out there. Some of these weeks he's getting 5-6 targets. So would you rather have Rachaad White or Alexander Mattison?
Yeah, just Alexander Mattison because the team's better. It's like a better line, a far better quarterback. Kirk Cousins is good. He's good. He's a top 14 whatever guy. Baker Mayfield is a maybe starting caliber player. He's playing a little bit better than that this year. I'm not sure if that holds, but yeah, it's definitely Alexander Mattison. It is very Brian Windhurst meme. This guy keeps getting all the touches and he scores no fantasy points. What's going on in Minnesota?
What's going on? I
can't hold this. I can't hold that line so long because he's getting, like you said, he's getting targets. He's getting a ton of red zone work. And that's like the argument I will eventually use to prop up Tony Pollard and to say Joe Mixon is a buy low. I think running back talent matters, but you know what matters more is carries on the 1 yard line.
I can't ignore all these opportunities in fantasy point scoring situations that Alexander Mattison is getting, even though I don't think he's any good.
Yeah.
Right? In a vacuum, if I were starting a franchise, I would absolutely want Rachaad White, but Madison's in a much better situation, and Cam Akers did something, said something. It was only a matter of time before he overstayed his welcome, right? This is not a player that really, truly wants to be a professional in the league. There's when you get just dumped on another team for a late day 3 pick, that says a lot, right? It was one thing when the Eagles had to give up multiple day 3 picks, one of them being a 4th rounder for DeAndre Swift. Those are real draft picks. Those draft picks have real value. Cam Akers was traded for nothing.
I want to say it will literally be almost nothing because he needs to reach 500 yards from scrimmage to like make the picks like conditionally swap or something like that. So there's a very real chance that it is a true zero trade. He was brought in to be like the final guy on the roster, like somewhere between healthy and active and playing special teams, but I don't think he actually plays special teams.
I mean, you could say that he's been unlucky, but I just think that when you're arguing with the coach and you're being marginalized in favor of a Darrell Henderson because you either refuse to run certain plays or you're not showing up to practice or whatever it is, then it's just, this isn't for you, man. Like, it's very difficult. Being a professional football player is really hard, and not everyone can do it. Not everyone can do it because they lack the mental acuity, they lack the work ethic, whatever it is, right? Some people just don't have the it factor. Blaine Gabbert, right? Blaine Gabbert even had the Wonderlick. He had the athleticism, he had the stature, the arm strength, the Wonderlick, but when he would drop back, something would short circuit, and he just had to just get it out of his hand. It was a hot potato, right? The game wasn't for him, though he has stuck around the league as a backup somehow. I just don't understand that. I don't understand how Blaine Gabber's still in the league, but he's still in the league.
Might just be a fun guy. Look, maybe that guy in the locker room, he cracks open a beer. He's like, "What's up, guys?
Nice guy.
Crazy game out there."
Yeah,
he's a cool guy
maybe
to hang
that's
out
what
with.
it is. I don't know. It was like Tim Boyle. Remember Tim Boyle on the Hard Knocks?
Do I remember Tim Boyle?
Tim Boyle was just around, right? He was just around. Like Aaron Rodgers would be waxing poetic, right? And he'd be giving this, the master's class level advice to Zach Wilson. Right? If only Zach Wilson could just listen really, really hard to what Aaron Rodgers is saying, maybe he'd become a different quarterback, take off the bandana, and it's going to happen for him, right? And then there's, in the background, there's Tim Boyle, always on Hard Knocks. This is amazing. But a player that's truly been snake. Imagine you're Roschon Johnson. Imagine the opportunity's there for you, and then you pick up a concussion right as the starter's going down, and they've already in the weeks prior leaked to the media they want you to get more touches. Then Khalil Herbert gets injured, and then you pick up a serious concussion. And I mean, this is after he broke his hand at the Senior Bowl and then couldn't participate in all the drills of the combine. He couldn't finish the Senior Bowl.
He looked very good his first season in college. You're thinking, oh, I'm going to get so many touches my second year. I'm gonna catch passes. I'm gonna do all these cool things. And they're like, Roschon, buddy, let us introduce you to Bijan Robinson. You're playing special teams for the rest of the season.
This makes me like Roschon even more, given how snake bitten he is. A lot of people are going to be dropping him tonight. We're recording this on Tuesday. Tonight they will be dropping Roschon Johnson, and I'm going to be picking him up because they do play the Raiders at home, and Khalil Herbert may very well miss the game, and he's a better player than Dante Foreman. And I'm just going to pick him up and watch those practice reports.
Yeah, Khalil Herbert's on IR. I think they put him on IR late last week, and Deonta Foreman was literally a healthy scratch for like 3 or 4 weeks. They have no interest in playing Deonta Foreman given any chance. Like, of course, they had to. They literally had no choice. He was the only healthy back on the roster. But yeah, we are.
This is why you're on the show. I did not. This is embarrassing. I did not know Khalil Herbert was on the IR. I did not know that. This is why we have someone from Rotoworld who is a professional football news person who doesn't have to look it up. He just knows top of the dome. Oh, yeah, Herbert's on IR. What are you talking about? It's going to be Roschon. Wheels up.
Yeah, it is so wheels up. It is, as someone who, my best ball teams, they're actually doing quite well, but we do need Roschon to come through for us. Maybe it's a little bit of optimism, but like he can play on all 3 downs, and his competition is a guy who is healthy scratched. Come on.
Let's go. And I gotta check the IR reports before my next show. Raheem Mostert and Tyreek Hill are amazing. Tyreek Hill's on pace for like 2,300 yards.
Yeah.
Raheem Mostert is a top 5 fantasy back after being drafted deep into best ball drafts and undrafted in a lot of traditional seasonal league drafts. What do you think about what's happening in Miami?
So I think Mike McDaniel's the best coach in the NFL. I don't care that like he hasn't won a Super Bowl and that he doesn't have the sort of bona fides of like, oh, this guy gets his terrible Mike Tomlin deserves a lot of credit for getting some really bad teams to 500. Like he had a great stretch of winning records and obviously won a bunch of Super Bowls, and he got a bunch of bad teams to look pretty solid. Mike Vrabel is another guy who, like, I don't know if he's ever going to win he's probably not ever going to win a Super Bowl with Titans, but he deserves a lot of credit for getting these really mediocre teams, aggressively mediocre teams, not only like into the playoffs, they had the 1 seed was like 2 years ago. I do not care. Mike McDaniel, in today's NFL, the best thing you can do to win games is score 1 trillion points. And you know who's so much better at doing that than anyone else on the face of this beautiful earth? It's Mike freaking McDaniel. So Tyreek Hill's very talented and Raheem Mostert is very talented. Those things also matter. But you can see what happens when you get talented players with not just a very good play caller, but for my money, like the best play caller. And I think that makes him the best head coach. I don't really care about a ton of other stuff when he's going out and dropping 70 a game.
I heard this last year about Brian Daboll.
Don't you bring that in. Mike McDaniel don't cast those aspersions on us. Like, you can look at a lot of the advanced stuff like Daniel's doing with pre-snap motion, with play action, the way he's moving to it, the way he's getting deep shots, and also the fact they're putting up a ton of points. Daniel Jones was fine last year. I think he like just barely cracked the top 10 in EPA. They weren't putting up points. Like they were a perfectly acceptable, we can beat the Vikings in the playoff type of team. It is not what we're seeing with Mike McDaniel. This is a, we can win the Super Bowl by dropping 60 on any team, even if we give up 40. And also, I'll say to Brian Daboll's, I don't want to say to credit, but to his defense this year, what the hell is he supposed to do? His quarterback is overpaid and not particularly good. His offensive line was maybe the worst in the NFL before losing like half of the starters. And all of his receivers are just like do-nothing slot guys. And his best actual pass catcher is a 31-year-old whose like best season was in 2020. Daboll's not doing himself any favors. That's a definite detriment of him. But he was never going to win this year. This is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, Daboll and Belichick, they have very similar wide receiver cores, right? The worst wide receiver cores are probably Patriots and the Giants. And it's no surprise that in a league where passing the ball is the best way to score points, that the team that's scoring the most points has the best receivers, and the teams with the worst receivers are scoring the least points.
Yeah, that's, you look at the Patriots team and Mac Jones playing terrible, but also like, oh, he got the first good pass he threw this week. Deep ball, Devontae Parker, going. Oh, it fumbles right through his hands. Like, yeah, as you point out, it turns out having really talented players on offense, something about that helps. Something about having Jalen Waddle as a guy who like, sometimes he shows up in the box score, but really we can just give it to three other guys and they'll all get 100 yards. Something about running that deep with electric players versus like, oh, geez, I hope Hunter Henry gets 6 for 60 this week. Something about the dichotomy of those two things has annihilated the Patriots franchise. Like, remember the offseason where they paid hundreds of millions of actual dollars for Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry and Kendrick Bourne and like Nelson Aguilar? I mean, this is the payment. This is the payment.
It's foolish.
It
was foolish at the time. We knew it was foolish at the time.
Everyone knew it. It was so bad. They had to their credit, they had to spend. They were like way below the cap floor. There's like a rolling cap floor or whatever. A way to spend it in the worst way possible. Like, great job.
Yeah, you could spend it on an offensive lineman. That's usually the best way to spend your money in your draft picks, but they didn't. Mediocre tight ends and receivers, if not just outright bad. Now, isn't it just, if you're the Patriots, don't you just go with Cunningham the rest of the way? Just play Malik Cunningham?
Sure. I mean, you're just doomed. Like, they're just screwed. There is no out. Malik Cunningham's cool. I think it would be fun to see him play. He literally, before taking out sack yardage, because I'm too lazy to take out the sack yards, ran for 1,000 yards and 20 freaking touchdowns in a college season as an actual quarterback. Yes. Would I want to see him play football for 13 games, whatever we have left? Yeah, I'd love to see that. Is the most likely outcome that by week 16, they're like, how does Drake May look? Is obviously the most likely outcome. He's like a UDFA quarterback. But sure, try anything. Mac Jones is not working. Well, hell, try Will Grier. It won't work, but throw something. See what sticks.
If I have Saquon Barkley in a league, do you think I can sell my league mates that his upcoming schedule is a positive thing and that they should want him and I should get something for him? Because they play Washington, which is actually not a team you want to play if you're a running back. The Jets, not a team you want to play as a running back, but they're both home games. So, hey, I got 2 home games coming up, and then the Raiders. So, do you think that you could sell your league mates on Barkley's schedule? Because I'm running and hiding. I don't think this offense is going to produce anything because they don't have the offensive line and they don't have the wide receivers. There's no way to sustain drives. And therefore, you can give Saquon Barkley all the carries, 24 carries, and he's going to give you 13 fantasy points. And that's just not helping you. But the Saquon Barkley brand, the name, has value, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't even think you need to sell him on the schedule. Be like, hey, remember Saquon Barkley? You remember that? Like, I know little peanut head loves recognizing that he's back. He got
back.
24 carries last week. He got like 28 touches, something like that. You're going to want this guy on your team. But I agree with you. Like, we talk about like usage, he's going to have so much empty value usage because he's going to be getting his own 19-yard line, 1st and 10 carries for 3 yards in a good day. They're not going to put him near the end zone, like not even get into the red zone because they're going to be very bad. So I think he's probably like, he probably still has some juice. Like he looked good last week.
That's what I'm saying. He looked good.
It won't matter. It just won't matter.
Looked good.
But you're right.
You got to trade him now, man.
I agree.
If you can, you got to get rid of him. You've been holding on. What you do is you hold on. So he gets to the point where he can prove his health. He looks good. You can sell people on the upcoming schedule. Get the hell out of there. That's what you got to do. There's no way to get out of there on Zach Charbonnet. Okay, Zach Charbonnet. Reddit was infuriated with me that I didn't have Zach Charbonnet on my top 5 handcuffs list, and I was humiliated and mocked and just condescended into oblivion by the Reddit mob because I dared leave Zach Charbonnet off my handcuffs list. Can you believe that? I put Chuba Hubbard on there instead.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like Zach Charbonnet coming out of college. He can do a lot of things. He's like big and can catch passes. That's fun.
Yeah.
But the problem is, and like I drafted a lot of him because I think part of handcuffing is like you just want to roll the injury dice and get lucky. So sure, if he had gotten if Ken Walker, God forbid, retires today, let's say he's healthy, he just retires, he hangs it up.
Yeah,
I'm ranking Zach Charbonnet rest of season really high. But there was never any chance for Zach Charbonnet to do I outplay the starter, I earn a committee job, and then when the starter gets hurt for even a week, I never give the job back. Such an obvious path for Chuba Hubbard to do that because Miles Sanders isn't good. Ken Walker's great.
Ken Walker is underrated.
He's so good.
He's so good. And, I feel bad for him that when Zach Charbonnet was drafted, we had to move Walker out of the top 5 dynasty running backs, and it scraped the bottom of my soul to do it, right? Because we have a whole system in place of projecting players out 3 years, and if you are going to insert a 2nd round running back with an all-purpose skill set and requisite size to be a workhorse, you naturally. The system that you've set up is going to throttle that 3-year projection.
Of course, right? Charbonnet looks like a guy who should get touches.
I was talking to Dario and Theo and Evan about this, and I'm like, man, God, if you're gonna come for the king, I mean, you can't miss, and Zach Charbonnet's not a can't miss guy. And Kenneth Walker's a stud. Look at their headshots side by side. Right? One guy wants to break his own nose and spit in your face. Right? Spit blood in your face. And I can't believe I screwed that up. That's good. I
think that's fair. That's fine. I think you had right process. They spent a lot of draft capital on him too. It wasn't like he was some nobody. I followed the same general process as you did. Maybe we went too far with it because Ken Walker looked really good last year. We should have not gone as far, but don't get too down on yourself, Matt. I think you generally were moving in the right direction. You can't not.
Oh, we're still ahead of consensus on Kenneth Walker. Always have been. But I just, the guy earned the right to be posted up in the top 5 and make them come for his crown. And I wanted to apologize to Kenneth Walker for that. And I even did that. I did the headshot juxtaposition all summer. I was like, look at this guy. This guy wants to eat nails for breakfast. The other guy, he's there he wants to be in a family photo, right? At JCPenney. It's just a different vibe, bro. Like you're not, good luck. Good luck to you, sir. Good luck to you, Zach. You're trying to take that guy's job. It's not going to happen. But the draft capital, right? Draft capital. And I, as a rule, recommend that we factor in draft capital 50% of what the public does. So if everyone else is factoring in draft capital at a 100, we factored in at a 50. That's just a general way to get ahead of the market at Player Profiler. And this year, like I said, the draft capital mob has had the worst year on record. Bryce Young, right? Not just Bryce Young, but Jahmyr Gibbs, Quentin Johnston. I talked about Dalton Kincaid. We go Zach Charbonnet down the board. Even Jackson Smith-Njigba, who we're going to talk about in a minute, right? But it hasn't been pretty for the draft capital mob is getting run over. Even if you go back a year, look at Treylon Burks, look at Jameson Williams, look at the aforementioned Jahan Dotson, right? Who's the best rookie wide receiver this year? Who's breaking records? Who's on pace to shatter? Like Anquan Bolden's, the modern day, best rookie wide receiver. Puka Nacua. He was like one of the last picks in the 5th round. So enough with the draft capital. I don't want to hear that term ever again.
That's fair. I think you're also on the right path where like dogmatically following draft capital is certainly not the right way. Like if you're,
they don't know anything, Kyle. They're giving so much credit for having all this information that we don't have. Right, that these scouts, they're writing it down in their little books that are not available to the public. God damn it. We don't have all that. They know something in Los Angeles about Quentin Johnston that we're missing when I'm looking at the comps. And his 20 top comps are Tommy Streeter and Jalen Reagor and Josh Dotson and Stephen Hill and just down the board to Justin Hunter. And I'm supposed to draft that guy in a rookie draft? I have 1 pick in my rookie draft. I'm supposed to put it on that guy? Fuck out of here, man. Well, I guess the Chargers saw something. Whatever they saw, it wasn't right. And it happens over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Where was Kyron Williams drafted? I mean, enough. Enough already.
42nd.
Yeah. Like, it turns out 5th round picks are outperforming 1st round picks, especially if they're Rams. Get out of here. Jackson Smith-Njigba, though. Jackson Smith-Njigba, that's one that I was surprised that he fell to close to, pick 20.
Same.
Where he looked like a top 10 talent when he was out producing, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson in 2021. So that was a warning sign that maybe he's not that sort of Drake London level prospect.
Nah, I'm not taking the L on this one. Screw that. I was still right about JSN. We're 6 games in.
I appreciate that. You don't have to produce huge numbers in weeks 1 through 6 in order to figure out a way to break out, especially when you're competing for targets with 2 very good, high-quality receivers. One is a full-blown specimen in DK Metcalf, and another is one of the best professional receivers in the league. So I agree with you. I'm not taking an L on Jackson Smith-Njigba. He just had an impressive 4-for-5 game for 48 yards. It wasn't, lighting up the box score.
But Josh Palmer-esque.
He was efficient, and he's a young rookie, and he has a lot of target competition, and he's chipping away. The way I see it, he's chipping away, and as someone who is actively rooting for every 1st-round pick to faceplant because I hate the draft capital mob so much, this one, hold firm.
We've made an exception. Yeah, I mean, he had his season high in route rate last week. It was a season high in target depth. They're chipping away at using him as a running back level targets. Are we there yet? We're not there yet. We need more routes a bit. We definitely need more air yards. but we're progressing. Whereas the difference between him and Quentin Johnston is literally regressing from what felt like zero, but I think last week was nearly his lowest route rate of the entire season, whereas at least Jackson Smith-Njigba is moving in the right direction. We've still got a way to go, and hell, we might not get this year, because like you said, they have legit wide receiver 1 and one of the better wide receiver 2s, but like, we're moving somewhere in the right direction. Johnston's moving somewhere. It's just, he's moving to a different team soon.
Johnson's moving. We have some activity in the chat here. We should share some activity in the chat here. This is from the Fantasy Football Ninja. Chargers GM, coach, probably ownership are all trash. Okay, cool. That. How do you really feel? More fantasy points this year: Jackson Smith-Njigba or T. Higgins?
Well, I just did the whole Jackson Smith-Njigba shtick. It's probably still T. Higgins.
Oh, man.
I know.
I had it. T. Higgins, a total bust.
He's probably going to go down as like a net negative this year.
Oh,
but like,
he is. If there was a fake alpha, oh man. I mean, he's got it. Like Calvin Ridley is a fake alpha, but only in the sense that so many fantasy gamers have deluded themselves based on one season with a hobbled Julio Jones. This guy was always 6'1", 190 and looked the part of a flanker, right? He was not an X receiver ever. And that's not his role. That's not what he's never. T. Higgins is like 6'4", 215 pounds, can go up and snatch it. This guy looked the part of an alpha coming out at Clemson, has put up 1,000-yard seasons, but has never delivered on the full potential, and he's looking like the definition of a fake alpha.
I mean, look, he plays with Jamar Chase. Of course, he's not going to see a bunch of targets. See, Chase is legit.
That lets him off, I think. I think that lets him off because the thinking and talking to Anand and Dury about the decisions that the Bengals need to make with their salary cap, they should not be paying T. Higgins. That is the last player they should be thinking about paying. He's like, oh, they want to keep him together. And I'm like, for them to devote that much salary just to the passing game, I mean, I'm a big fan of investing in the passing game, but they don't need to do that. They don't need to do that. Wherever T. Higgins plays football in the years ahead, it's going to be on an overpaid contract, and you have to minimize the number of players you're overpaying if you want to win a championship.
Yeah, he's going to get the bag. Maybe he doesn't deserve it. He's still outscoring Jackson Smith-Njigba this year.
He is. You know who's doing really well this year? People that drafted 0 RB. Right? RotoViz! It's a comeback! It's happening! 0 RB! Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, when he was healthy. Cooper Kupp is back. Diggs, Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, hero. These are our fantasy heroes. They're all hitting. And the running backs are just a pestilence. It's bad, man. I've never seen the receivers in the first couple rounds hit harder than these receivers I just listed, in comparison to the running backs in those rounds flaming out with such a catastrophic results.
Yeah, this is going to be a windmill for the RotoViz guys this year. You've got the number 2 running back in the NFL is Raheem Mostert in terms of fantasy points. Number 3 or 4 is Kyron Williams. Whereas you look at the first round, like you look at all the best wide receiver ones, and it's like Amon-Ra at 10, you've Justin Jefferson at 13 because he missed a game. He won't be there, but Jamar Chase at 7, and he's getting hot right at the perfect time. His worst games are probably behind him. Obviously, Tyreek Hill on pace to break the receiving yards record by like 400, just a casual 400.
Yeah, but Jamar Chase could outproduce him the rest of the way.
Nah.
You don't think so? I think there's a non-zero chance that Jamar Chase outproduces
non-zero.
The rest of the way.
I agree with non-zero. Hill is doing things that we'll probably never see again.
It's amazing. He's in his 30s.
Incredible. if you survived Cooper Kupp 4 games, you're getting the full Cooper Kupp experience now. He is 100% Cooper Kupp. And then, I missed out on those guys. Oh, let me just get like back to back 120 some yard games from AJ Brown. Let me get a bunch of 100-yard games from Stephon Diggs. And even the running backs who are healthy from the first 3 rounds is like Tony Pollard. So disappointing. Josh Jacobs, terrible offense, not doing anything. Like the ones that are healthy are, I mean, it's what, Pat Green wrote about this a few years ago. It's like the dead zone starts at pick 1. Like the running backs are just fragile up at the top. They still have incredible ceilings. CMC could maybe be the highest scoring fantasy player ever. Like I think he has that second place locked up from his 2020 season or something like that. He could maybe go back and do it again. He can get up there. But outside of that, the floors on these guys are so low. And even the funniest thing is like, oh, the dead zone shifted back a few rounds this year. You used to have to pay a 3rd round pick for Dameon Pierce. We used to have to pay a 4th round pick for Rachaad White. And to some degree, like, yes, that price obviously matters. But as it turns out, the guys that we're calling dead zone guys, like, they're total dead zone backs. They're absolute jags who get usurped by Devin Singletary and are marginally better than Sean Tucker. They're just like, it's an archetype for a reason, because these guys face plant, not because, oh, they're slight values, let's adjust the value. They would have needed been going so late for them to be good picks.
The guys that flamed out in the dead zone were so easy to see, with the exception of Rachaad White, like Dameon Pierce. And then the guys that had the huge upside that you were taking shots on were so easy to see, from Kenneth Walker to DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery. I mean, it based on the offenses they were operating in and the fact that they were all-purpose backs. It was just this isn't hindsight. These were conversations we were having all summer, and I felt so alone. I was like, I can't believe that everyone has walked away from 0 RB in the year when you absolutely want all of these, like, receivers through Chris Olave. You want them all, okay? And you don't want any of these early round running backs, really, compared to the receivers you could have. The opportunity cost just is not high enough. And the dead zone is as alive as it's ever been. What am I missing? It was a perpetual, just rhetorical question of the offseason. What am I missing? Why haven't I read, 1,700 0 RB articles like I did in 2017? I didn't understand it. And now we're seeing that my perplexity was justified. I don't know if perplexity is a word, but I used it and it felt great.
We got it. Yeah, we got it.
So to change our topic of conversation 100% to a dead zone receiver, I am looking forward to being right 2 ways on Gabriel Davis. That, of course, you didn't want any part of him in the 4th round last year, but when he's falling to the 7th and 8th round, yeah, you just bet on the offense. And if he's going to be the number 2 in that offense, and the argument is Dalton Kincaid is going to crowd him out, get the hell out of here. What are we talking about? And coming off a dud performance, do you believe Gabriel Davis is one of the best buy lows in fantasy right now?
Nah, I mean, if people are so focused on one dud performance, sure, but I'm going to give people a little bit of credit and assume that they're not so laser focused on the one dud performance. He's 39th in yards per route run. He's 30th in fantasy points per game, despite having 4 touchdowns. He's just this. He's like the same Gabe Davis he was last year, except running hot and not injured. I do think that played a part in it. But like he's running hot. He has 4 touchdowns through 6 games. I think it'd be hard to sell or hard to buy low on that given his production. So
I think you could always buy low on Gabriel Davis. No one really believes in him. Who's your guy? So last week my buy low was Michael Pittman, cha-ching. This week my buy low is Gabriel Davis. We'll see. Who's yours?
It's Tony Pollard. I can't stand that he needs Zeke to be the guy who takes all the body blows people, whether in fact they're right, whether that's what's happening, we will literally never, like, you just can't tell. But in practice and what is actually happening, they've 100% been right. The results have been what they predicted. I don't give a shit. He's literally on pace to have one of the most highly used red zone seasons ever. He's I think he's one of 2 running backs, him and CMC, with 25 carries in the red zone and 25 targets. And there's the upside that he's still good. Guys, imagine this. What if this guy...
Thank you for saying this, by the way. Thank you for saying
what if he's still good? Maybe he's not. But
I'm always in the market for Tony Pollard. If you have Tony Pollard and you're sick of him, trade him to me.
Send him, please.
Ship it.
I can take the pain.
Ship it, baby. Ship it. More fantasy points this year. Michael Mayer or Dalton Kincaid?
I think it's Michael Mayer.
Yeah, baby! I knew it! Oh, there we go. Another body blow for the draft capital mob. Suck it. First round pick. Don't care.
I mean, Mayer should have been taken over him. Mayer was legitimately a better prospect. I didn't think, like, Kincaid was fine. Like, Kincaid was a good prospect. Take him on top of the second round. I'm cool with that. I thought Laporta was maybe better. I don't really, whatever. Mayer was a legit first round, back of the first round, even like pushing into that top 20 level prospect. I was kind of shocked he fell into the second round. So it should be no surprise that I'm picking him. I do think the major problem is he has one of the best number 1 receivers on his team in the league on his team. And Jacoby is a legit number 2. Like, he's putting up numbers that would like be number 1 numbers on other teams. He just happens to play alongside Devontae. But the thing is, Mayer may
actually be better receiver. Who's a better receiver? You were starting a franchise. Similar age. Okay. He's been more productive. Certainly more consistent. Would you want T. Higgins or Jacoby Myers?
I think I still want T. Higgins. I still want T. Higgins.
See? This is the thing. That guy with that profile he has an allure. That's why he's going to get paid, dude.
You see, the thing is, T. Higgins is big. He's big and strong. I want the big, strong guy.
I
Even
know.
though you're 100% right that, like, I'm sure his numbers, you're going to be like, oh, he has 2 900-yard seasons and Jacoby has 2 800-yard seasons. They're like functionally a coin flip, but I'm like, give me big, strong T. Higgins.
I am seeing right now, I'm looking at an article on CBS Sports. Is Bill Belichick on the hot seat? And
he should, man.
A week ago, I mentioned this. I said, does Bill Belichick make it to the end of the season? It's like, oh, of course. There's no way. There's no way. But as these losses stack up, especially bad losses like to the Raiders, now it's a real possibility this guy is gone, and he should. How? How do you not self-scout your wide receiver room and let your best receiver walk at value? How do you not lock him up into an extension a year earlier? It's just one thing after. I mean, you can talk about Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar and all these bad signings. Sure, those all stacked up too. But to me, it was you found this guy that no one saw. He was undrafted. And you brought him in, Jacoby Myers, and you said, hey, you're starting, and the guy we drafted in the first round, he's not even going to see the field. You did it all right? And then to not keep him is just negligent.
Yeah, well, they saved, what, $5-7 million on getting Juju, and they spent that money on what? Mike Gesicki? James Robinson?
It's gross. It's just what they've done is so gross and such a mismanagement that now they have to tear the whole thing down. Everybody's getting fired. And no, Bill Belichick is not going to make it to the end of the season. He is not. I don't care. Eventually you look up and a team is 1-10 and the hard conversation has to happen. Bill Belichick will not make it to January as a head coach in the NFL.
I think they do him the courtesy of saying in week 10, Bill, we're looking for your replacement, and they probably let him retire. They quote let him quote retire at the end of the season. I think that
would be an elegant way to do it. That would be a good solution to a problem. It would be. I've seen a lot of players labeled as league winners. Who would you say is actually the league winning player this year? Who do you think it's going to be? Because I have two guys in mind. They're both running backs. Spoiler alert. Who would you say that if you had to pick a league winner?
I think it's Raheem Mostert. He is right now the RB2, putting up elite numbers. Even when Achane comes back, I mean, he was putting up elite numbers with Achane. His numbers maybe come down a bit, but he's going to be the RB2 that costs you, like, after Jeff Wilson got put on IR, like a 12th or 13th round pick. And in a setup where, as we mentioned, zero RB is doing so well, he's the linchpin to make it all work. Assuming you don't get McCaffrey, okay, he's the only way right now we have to get up in that range.
Okay. For the record, you have to verify this. We did not talk about this question before the show. We did not email about the show. We did not talk about this question at all. I did not know who you were going to say. Right? You did not share with me your notes. I did not know you were going to say Mostert.
It's a windmill, dude. He is balling.
I knew you would say Mostert. Okay? But I am also a magician. And I knew the card you were going to pull out of the deck. And it's the wrong card. It's not correct.
So you have another running back.
Yes. Yes. My definition of a league winner does not necessarily need to be deep round guy. A guy that basically functions as the linchpin of a roster build that gives you access to all the receivers you need and the quarterback you want and everything else, and then also delivers a top 5 season. A guy I think is going to lead the league in rushing. I think the league-winning running back this year is actually Travis Etienne.
Etienne's good. He's really good. I think the thing
I don't think you need to go that deep, and I think that once Achane returns, that Mostert's production is going to fall back into that RB2 zone, and through the fantasy playoffs, RB2 production is not good enough. All I'm seeing every week is Travis Etienne either putting up like 5 to 6 catches or multiple touchdowns. He's the most consistent RB1 producer, and he was available in the 4th round. And it was one of the more obvious hero RB build draft picks because it was just after all the wide receivers you really want are exhausted. There's Travis Etienne staring you right in the face.
Yeah, well, what about Tank Bigsby? What? Think about that. Think about how many goal line carries Tank Bigsby is going to take away. Think about all the catches he's going to have. I know he was a terrible pass catcher in college, and I think he got his first actual USDA grade reception in week 6. Like the Tank Bigsby is going to Tank Bigsby. Yeah, the Tank Bigsby is going to take carries away from this like elite runner. What a wild time we lived in. What a fun little stretch of the summer.
My favorite thing was I did a TikTok, me of coming out of a porta potty, and I said, "Woo! I just drafted Jahmyr Gibbs over Travis Etienne," because these are both first round picks. All right, they're both coming from the big time programs, with elite receiving skills in college. Right. So basically one guy has more size, has the primary back job locked up. The other guy is going to be ceding most of those red zone carries to David Montgomery. But also one guy has the advantage of having played in the NFL. The other guy never has. And so basically you're speculating on a player being at his ceiling, at his upside, his maximum upside, his ceiling outcome. You're hoping you're getting Travis Etienne. So let me get this straight. You're in the 3rd round, and you're going to go with a guy that at his very best would be the guy you can get in the 4th round, a round later. Explain this to me. That was the easiest porta potty TikTok video I've ever shot.
It's a classic what's in the box. It could be anything, even a boat situation.
It could be anything. And even Kyle, it could be Travis Etienne. Can you imagine how lucky you would be? We got to get this guy. You never know. It's like, God. All right. Deep on your Dynasty rosters. look deep in the taxi squad. Give me your truther. Give me your top truther guy.
I mean, I don't like that this is deep anymore. Rashad Bateman. Bateman is deep in the way that you don't want to be, because
we're officially Bateman truthers, you and me.
I know.
God,
that's
what a miserable
to,
place this is to be.
100%. It feels terrible.
Oh, terrible.
He was really good last year. We only saw it for like 5 weeks or whatever, but they were using him as this outside field stretcher, and he was crushing in yards per route run. He was unlocking things for the offense. And now they use Nelson Aguilar in that role. Who am I to say who's better? Rashad Bateman, very strong prospect.
Bateman does look. I mean, as again, this is someone who thinks that Rachaad White looks electric.
Yeah,
like I think Rachaad White looks dynamic. Rashad Bateman, he looks sluggish to me out there. He doesn't look right. He doesn't look as smooth and as explosive as I've seen him in the past. I think we may be a year away from potentially maybe seeing him in a number 2 role across from Flowers and being productive. It's very possible, but those of us that are truthers, that's the hope, is that he can get fully healthy. He can have a productive and, off season that allows him to rediscover that rapport with Lamar Jackson, get his health and conditioning just, tip top. And then what's the upside? Oh, he's the third receiver.
We'd love it. I'd do anything for that at this point. I'm
in hell. I'm in hell. That sounds like hell. Like that's our yeah, because I would say he's my number 1 truther too. And the fact that that's best case scenario is such a misery. Give me a bold prediction. Get us out of here. Bold prediction me.
All right, I said Tony Pollard, you buy low. You're not just buying low. You're getting a top 2 running back. The only running back who outscores Tony Pollard for the rest of the season is Christian McCaffrey. Not only are we getting all the touchdowns, of course we're getting all the touchdowns. That comes with the territory of being an elite red zone weapon. This garbage of him not being efficient will not stand. He will be the only non-McCaffrey running back you want at the end of the season.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.